Hi.
Hello again. We're on page 323 of In Search of Christian Freedom by Ray Franz. God says through Isaiah and Jeremiah, I will remember your sins no more. How is Watchtower headquarters doing in this respect? Ray starts at the Brooklyn headquarters, as also at branch offices in the various countries. There are files recording all disfellowshipping actions. Not only the names of those disfellowshipped, but also the correspondence containing some details of the action is generally retained. It may be retained for a considerable time, many years, even after an individual has been reinstated. For some strange reason, even when a person listed dies, the practice at the Brooklyn headquarters has been to retain the record of his or her having been disfellowshipped, to which he has a footnote which reads, orange-colored disfellowship cards are used for the file on disfellowshipped persons. John Mitchell, who worked in the service department as well as in the secretarial work in the executive offices, relates that after cards were stamped with the word deceased, they were then put back in the file. He quotes a fellow worker, Lee Waters, as observing, quote, we must be the only organization which keeps records like this for dead people.
And then Ray continues, in 1973, a witness wrote to the headquarters stating that on a tour of the Brooklyn facilities, the tour guide had pointed out a file cabinet marked confidential and explained that it contained the records of those disfellowshipped. This man had been disfellowshipped some 16 years before and had been reinstated only 7 months after the disfellowshipment. The briefness of the period was because of the minor nature of the problem. In his letter he stated that other elders told him that they thought the disfellowshipping action was taken only because the society was stressing loyalty to the organization. 4 months after being disfellowshipped, and before his reinstatement, he had been drafted for military service and had been willing to face imprisonment by refusing. In his letter he wrote that he found it disturbing to think that, in addition to the inner suffering he had experienced as a result of the disfellowshipping, he was now confronted with the probability that his name was on a confidential file. He said that having a mark against one on permanent file like a police file at the precinct seemed to me highly irregular. In his word, God mercifully invites those sinning to reconcile with him, and assures them that, though their sins be as scarlet, they will be made white just like snow, and says, I shall forgive their error, and their sin I shall remember no more. It seemed, as seen by contrast, the Watchtower organization carefully maintains voluminous files containing a vast amount of embarrassing information. Even on a tour, why do you mention, that file there has everybody's secrets, Why would you do that?
Throughout this chapter, Ray seems to be musing upon the parables of Jesus. And here, the prodigal son in particular, in the last 4 pages under the subhead, he's thinking about the contrast between the attitude of the organization towards sin and sinners and the character of the Father is revealed not only in the prodigal son, but in the other 2 parables in Luke 15. All 3 parables there are about lost. The lost sheep and the lost coin, and now most famously the prodigal son, who is thought to be, the Father says, lost and now found.
The seeking for the one over the 99.
More concern over the stray than the flock that is retained, the numbers. So there's a footnote on page 323 that relates to the prodigal son illustration, which we'll read in a minute. The footnote says, for many years it was viewed as improper to pray for disfellowshipped persons. The branch committee in Great Britain, in a letter dated May 3rd, 1979, referred to the parable of the prodigal son when inquiring of the governing body about this policy, citing the case of a, quote, faithful sister whose son, disfellowshipped 14 years ago for fornication, is now married with 2 children and is no longer a fornicator, end of quote. And expressing how difficult it was to tell the sister it was wrong to pray for her son, that is, pray for his return to the organization. The policy changed. See the Watchtower of October 15, 1979, page 31, and the woman could now pray for her son. Yet his disfellowship status and the label going with it remained. More recent Watchtowers have emphatically stressed avoidance by relatives of association with any such disfellowship ones, not because they are now wrongdoers, but because they have not gone through the organization's procedure for reinstatement. And I do know that while we were in there, the policy moved several times, never, of course, completely getting rid of the shunning policy. But at certain points it seemed to be more severe and less severe.
Yeah.
And the rules changed.
Yeah, and that too it creates an enormous amount of stress on those involved, both the ones that are disfellowshipped and the ones that have disfellowshipped relatives. Because how do you explain, and you don't usually get an explanation?
Yeah,
Suddenly they ease up and they're talking to you, and then a month later they're not talking to you. But nobody explains to you why. It's because the policy changes. So where is God in this? It's, them deciding who you can pray for. It just seems absolutely unthinkable now that we could have followed this.
So, at the present time, it would appear that the policy is about as strict as it's ever been in terms of shunning. Mm-hmm. So, it is good to look at the most famous of the 3 lost parables and just try to notice the difference in the attitude of the father in the parable of the prodigal son compared with the Watchtower.
Then he said, "A certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the part of the property that falls to my share.' Then he divided his means of living to them. Later, after many days, the younger son gathered all things together and traveled abroad into a distant country, and there squandered his property by living a debauched life. When he had spent everything, a severe famine occurred throughout that country, and he started to be in need. He even went and attached himself to one of the citizens of that country, and he sent him into his fields to herd swine. And he used to desire to be filled with the carob pods which the swine were eating, and no one would give him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many hired men of my father are abounding in bread, while I am perishing here from famine? I will rise and journey to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy of being called your son. Make me as one of your hired men.' So he rose and went to his father. While he was yet a long way off, his father caught sight of him and was moved with pity. And he ran and fell upon his neck and tenderly kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy of being called your son. Make me as one of your hired men.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quick, bring out a robe, the best one, and clothe him with it, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. And bring the fattened young bull, slaughter it, and let us eat and enjoy ourselves. Because this my son was dead and came to life again. He was lost and was found.' And they started to enjoy themselves. Now his older son was in the field, and as he came and got near the house, he heard a music concert and dancing. So he called one of the servants to him and inquired what these things meant. He said to him, 'Your brother has come, and your father slaughtered the fattened young bull, because he got him back in good health. But he became wrathful and was unwilling to go in. Then his father came out and began to entreat him. In reply he said to his father, "Here it is so many years I have slaved for you. Never once did I transgress your commandment, and yet to me you never once gave a kid for me to enjoy myself with my friends. But as soon as this young son, who ate up your means of living with harlots, arrived, you slaughtered the fattened young bull for him." Then he said to him, "Child, you have always been with me, and all the things that are mine are yours. But we just had to enjoy ourselves and rejoice, because this your brother was dead and came to life, and he was lost and was found."
I would say both of the sons reflect more of the Watchtower's, or let's say Jehovah's Witnesses' attitude. So the younger son comes back and apparently expects some kind of a test.
Yeah.
Some kind of a test of his status or his
never
morality.
to be forgiven, really.
And wants a different status. He says he deserves a different status now than his son.
Mm-hmm.
And the older son, well, I think there's no doubt in my mind. If you'd asked me that even when I was an elder, Jehovah's Witness elder, I would have said, yeah, that's more or less us.
Yeah.
We want you prove your status. You prove you're a changed person before I'll decide how to treat you.
We call this the prodigal son, but really it should be the prodigal sons.
Yeah.
And we heard a sermon on this by Tim Keller who makes that point. Really both sons are not behaving well. You know, in one of them going off and squandering, but the other one in his unforgiving attitude, his he's almost obeying his father not because he loves him, but out of duty. And how often is that the case with a witness behaving himself because he feels it's his duty, rather than because he has a loving heart towards God?
So we could ask which one, especially the older brother, the younger brother too, but especially the older brother, which one exhibits the character of God the Father? Which one knows the heart of God the Father? Because after all three lost parables here, the lost sheep, the lost coin, and now the lost sons, as Keller says, plural. All three of them exhibit the same characteristic about God himself. This is the point of the parables. That God's character is seen in the extreme lengths to which God will go to redeem a lost sheep, to find a lost coin, and to greet a lost child that comes back and doesn't go through any period of probation, a testing by the local elders before dad knows how to treat him.
Yeah. You know, this kind of a response of seeing his son and immediately being able to go and show him affection and kindness and love would not be possible in the Watchtower. Because if your child was disfellowshipped and returned home, you would send him to the elders to, find out whether or not you can talk to him.
Where you stand and where he stands in the eyes of organization, not God. So here's the heart of the Father versus the heart of the
Just
the
try
institution.
And read this story and rewrite it with Watchtower policy in it. I don't think it would have made it into the canon if it was presented that way. It would be there would be no heart tugging, there'd be no warmth.
It would be legalism.
Yeah, callous, hard.
In the next subhead, Ray has a course unsupported by biblical precedent. See you next time.